Hello and welcome to Unwarranted Music Opinions, the show in which three music nerds forcibly force
Stop. No, it's a show where three people listen to music and we under the premise of picking albums to listen to. That is it. That is all it is.
then it comes out the mouth and in the ears and all that. That happens somewhere along the line. I'm June Lindbergh here with Brian Courtney
Hello. I don't have a joke. I was trying.
and Chaz Jenkins.
We're not going to take it anymore.
Okay. I think we're going to kick things off with your record. It's a regular episode, and we all just chose records that we decided that were going to be fun to talk about today, and ended up with a pretty varied selection. One of the most varied genre-wise that we've had in quite some time. Kicking things off, of course, with Chaz's pick.
It sounds like a off-brand metal band. Speaking of which,
We're the
Chags. Speaking of which, I did the 1984, I consider glam metal classic, Stay Hungry by heavy metal, hard rock, notably glam metal band Twisted Sister. So I knew for this season, right out of the get-go, that I wanted to get more metal on the show. Okay, I'm
Definitely
repeating.
the most Chaz core metal genre, I think.
I'm hearing.
I don't know. Like when you think about Andrew WK and then you listen to Twisted Sister, there's absolutely similarities there.
Yeah, you're right. I guess I could see that. But so I want to get some glam metal because I think that'd be a fun genre to talk about.
Especially in 2021, we are past the obsession of glam metal in the mainstream, and then we're also past the just fervent hatred for glam metal as well. We're kind of at a point where we look back on stuff from like the 90s and before, so far removed from the original cultural context that it doesn't matter so much. And we can look at this stuff, and even if like maybe your favorite artists at the time hated the style that the other ones were doing, we're at a point in time where you kind of can step back and enjoy both of them for different reasons.
So glam metal started in the 80s, early 80s, I'd say about 81, with bands like Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, some later ones like Poison, later Kiss, I'd say, just to name a few. Definitely more about the theatrics, the makeup, the androgynous, buffy, beefy men wearing like pink and purple and light blue and shit. And it started in California, obviously. But interestingly enough, things like glam rock and glam punk came way before it. So it's interesting to see that it took metal a little while to pick up on that trend. And much
a group like the New York Dolls has a huge amount of influence on that kind of thing. Like,
absolutely.
They're one of the earliest examples of this. And obviously, I'm eating. Yeah, hold on.
Recording.
Sorry. I had a thought and was eating. You can just leave this in. I'll just squirrel it to the side. This probably sounds fine.
It's fine.
It's also important to note the influence the New York Dolls had on the aesthetic, and David Bowie as well. They're kind of like proto-glam in some ways, but David Bowie is outright like glam rock, right? But like you said, those coming before, those were kind of the influences as far as the aesthetic goes.
So much like how prog rock inspired punk, glam metal, if you don't know, inspired grunge. It was just over bloating the airwaves, and it was just getting super stale that, little old band named Nirvana came out with some albums and just completely changed the musical landscape into the 90s, and then gave us post-grunge, and then it's just been downhill ever since. Twisted Sister.
A brief history of rock music.
Yeah. Fronted by badass Dee Snider, one of the coolest dudes out there in the rock landscape. Really cool front man. Super cool attitude. Just an all-around great guy. This is Twisted Sister's, give me a second.
Third studio album?
Yes, third studio album. And it's their most successful, and I'd say their best. It has the hits, We're Not Gonna Take It, I Wanna Rock. But I think the album as a whole is a pretty solid piece of music. But when it comes to Twisted Sister as a whole, when you want to talk about glam metal, I think they're the best you could get. I think they blow Motley Crue out of the fucking water. And this is in terms of music and an attitude and just personality. They blow Motley Crue out of the water. Rat, Dokken, Who, Quiet Riot, yeah, right. Poison and Warrant, like a bunch of shit. Twisted Sister.
Are you role playing as someone in the 80s describing these bands?
Probably. I guarantee you there's one person out there who thinks exactly how I am right now. I think Twisted Sister kicks all their asses because they still have some grit. They still have that heavy metal vibe to them, but also have the huge theatrics. So talking about the album Stay Hungry, this is some Gregcore right here. My dad got me into Twisted Sister. He showed me the music videos for We're Not Gonna Take It and I Wanna Rock at a very early age. I thought they were fucking awesome. It's just classic shit, just like Kraftwerk or any like The Who, that kind of stuff. Twisted Sister was right there. This is the first time in a while that I've listened to the whole album. So it was practically like listening to it through the first time. But it doesn't matter who you are. We've all heard those huge hits, especially We're Not Gonna Take It. It's one of the biggest songs ever. I mean, I don't
What's
think
crazy is I Wanna Rock only charted like number 68 on the Billboard. I thought it would have been way bigger than that. It went on to receive like accolades in like it was like one of the top 20 metal songs of all time from like Rolling Stone or something, but it only charted like number 68, which is not like top 100 is cool, but like it's so much more ubiquitous than that in my mind.
Well, I think
I heard it and I immediately was like, oh shit, the SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yep, it's all can be akin to Goofy Goober Rock, an amazing cover of this song, I guess we'll call it. Just sure. So to give my thoughts, album of highlights. Some inconsistencies here and there. A beautiful comment that sums up my thoughts perfectly. The big hits and the album cuts sound like they're from two completely different albums. But I do actually really enjoy a lot of the album cuts. But there's a few weak stuff. But Twisted Sister's awesome. Glam metal is one of those genres that you can have a lot of fun with and can get bad really quick. But I don't think we ever reach any of those moments here. But what'd you guys think?
So this whole experience of listening to glam metal and trying to break down the influences made me think about like, why did it take so long for metal to get campy and glammy? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Not that metal in the 70s, not that hard rock and heavy metal in the 70s isn't campy as shit, but it still has a self-serious attitude about itself.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is like, I just want to have fun for the most part. You know, there are some like typical metal lyrical tropes going on here.
Yeah.
But it's also a great deal poppier and campier than a lot of metal that came before it. And I'm wondering if maybe that's because it took metal so long because it was just this hardcore type of sound. I mean, when it came around in like the early 70s, nothing sounded as dark and as rough. I mean, unless you listen to, free jazz or like, really obscure garage rock, or whatever. But in the mainstream, like metal was hard shit and you were serious. It was serious music, And then in the 80s, it kind of turned away a little bit, at least in the mainstream. Obviously you have like death metal and black metal and thrash metal and all that. Obviously there's always gonna be exceptions to the rule, but we're talking about hair metal, glam metal specifically. I think that added campiness and poppiness is the most interesting thing about the genre, and I think it's the most interesting thing about Twisted Sister. Twisted Sister are a band that I enjoy, I especially like their ethos more so than, like you mentioned, like a Motley Crue. And Dee Snider, of course, his
iconic
hearing.
I watched that whole hearing.
It's an
fucking
iconic
amazing. That I watched that whole hearing. Holy shit.
He's a great dude, and you can hear basically, and what he's talking about there is exactly what Twisted Sister was setting out to do, which is just make some fun rockin' music and not take itself so seriously. So it's kind of crazy that Twisted Sister, of all bands, were the ones that they pointed out a lyric and were like, "Ooh, this is kind of dark and Satan." It's like Twisted Sister is one of the poppiest metal bands I've ever heard.
It's like, it's crazy that we just talked about Acid Bath, which came out like years later, and it's like, this was the stuff that was freaking you all out. I mean, Jesus Christ, they weren't ready.
They were freaked out because it's popular. I mean, that's why, right? Like, or they're not, it's two totally. Acid Bath is like super, obscure compared to Twisted Sister, right?
But my point is that Acid Bath wouldn't be the best comparison to make here. I'm surprised they didn't go for like Slayer or something.
Yeah, or
Which is
Metallica.
invariably much darker.
Even Metallica or Megadeth or Iron Maiden, which were out by this point just as huge, I'd say. Maybe not Iron Maiden, but Metallica and Megadeth for sure were huge by this point.
Not to derail the conversation or anything, but Slayer easily had the most brutal aesthetic of all those bands. Like, obviously, like there's some of the stuff you look back and is a little bit cheesier, but like the Slayer, the Rain in Blood album cover is, for the time, pretty gritty, like pretty no nonsense.
Still a gritty record. I mean,
like that album cover kind of influenced, really thinking about it now, it probably went on to influence some of the death metal cover, like from the band Death, right? Because you can see some similarities there.
But anyway. Brian, you made the best point. I think do you see Slayer getting a top 10 hit? No, it's bands like Twisted Sister with We're Not Gonna Take It. I mean, the
element of pop.
Yeah. The public heard that and were like, whoa, our kids, think about the children,
But it's also kind of hard to say, oh my God, the kids, think about the children, when the songs that are making it to the charts are We're Not Gonna Take It and I Wanna Rock, which are lyrically extremely simple, but are infectious, have really strong hooks, have really good guitar riffs, and are just, they succeed at being super fun, catchy songs that are likable and not like eye-rolling and making you want to turn it off all the time. I do think that, as you said, Chaz, that this is an album of highlights. The highlights being the poppier cuts on the record. I do appreciate that Twisted Sister, and you can see it straight from the album cover. It's glam metal, but it doesn't lose all sense of grit. Mm-hmm. Even the vocals from Dee Snider aren't super, super high up in the register. They're a little lower, they're a little gravelier. But I think the more standard metal song structures and topics on this record aren't great, because I think they're just better at writing catchy riffs and hooks than they are at writing like cool or dark songs. An example of this would be Horror Terrier and some of the tracks in the back half, like The Beast.
Yeah. The Beast or The Price is kind of a moment that's not on that darker heavy metal side. It's actually like one of the more emotional cuts. However, I don't really find like that's one of the things about the record is it's pretty easy to talk about the qualities of it because there's nothing really buried away. There's nothing really secret about it, right?
Yeah.
It's all very much right on the surface.
It's glam metal.
You don't need to read. Lyrically, there's not a lot to parse through, right? So what I was saying about The Price in that regard is it doesn't really work as an emotional cut for me. Like, I don't really... The place it was written from does not resonate with me because it was pretty much a personal song for Dee as far as I could tell from its origins, like what it was written about. Because they were broke around the time that they were touring on their first two albums, and then this song was written very quickly about kind of the feelings of being broke, being away from family. And that's, I can understand that situation and empathize with that. But lyrically, as a song and like in the context of this album, one of my least favorites.
I mean, to me, that's one of my weaker songs too. It's the guitar tone. I mean, you hear that first riff come in, and it's like, this sounds like everything that was coming out at that time and what would come out. I mean, that's like one of those songs, as much as I love Twisted Sister, you hear and you go, yeah, that's why grunge became a thing. It's like, it's just so boring. It's one of the more boring songs on here, I think. I don't really particularly care for that song.
Another huge problem I have with the album is the more I listen to it, the more it wore thin on me pretty quickly because it's very, very formulaic. And I know that's on purpose. And I know that they're trying to write as many pop hits as possible. But the fact that like over half the track list kind of is in the shadow of the other half of the track list. And for me, it's kind of more than half is in the shadow of a couple of the other tracks. That is a huge bane on this album, because by the time we get to a song that like Don't Let Me Down, which is a pretty good song, I'm totally tuckered out on the formula, because there are better, like it's okay as a song, but Stay Hungry is like fucking great, like a super great. I love his big vocal performances on a lot of the tracks. That's probably my favorite thing about it. I thought it was really weird that my favorite track on here is Burn in Hell, because like June was saying, when they're just trying to write the most straightforward, catchy rock song ever, that usually goes over a little bit better. Something about the riffs on this one is so awesome. I love that big cheesy lead in. Dude, it's the drum beat is so like driving and propelling, and the whole song it's a killer pace the whole fucking time. Love it. Easily my favorite vocal refrain with the "See no evil, don't you hear no evil." Dude, that fucking shit gets me so fucking pumped up. Oh my god, it was easily runaway favorite. One of my favorite rock songs we've just done for the show in general. Fucking amazing song. Stellar, huge standout. Probably like my song of the week. Huge highlight on this thing. Like mountain peak above everything else. Yeah, so I guess to talk about the two biggest songs, I Wanna Rock and We're Not Gonna Take It. I think I prefer I Wanna Rock in terms of the tune. We're Not Gonna Take It is a little more like vocal, like group vocal driven, right? Like this is definitely designed to get like a crowd to chant it and stuff. Awesome probably to see live. Probably a fucking incredible live song. I Wanna Rock is just a little more kick-ass to me. Even though it is easily the most repetitive song on the album, but it's just a strong riff, and to deny its iconic status is a little bit impossible, and that kind of feeds into my love for it too, because it's like, this is just a classic song. I can't help but feel like it's a good song because of that, and it is pretty infectious.
Didn't you just say yesterday you didn't like it?
Yeah, but I just I turned around on it a little bit, because I was like, you know what, I can like, if I can like, some of the more straightforward Andrew WK songs that are like if I can like party hard, I can get into I Wanna Rock, right?
It might have been like I mentioned Andrew WK yesterday, and I think the comparison is pretty apt when you consider the poppier parts of his record. You could say that Andrew WK writes like pop metal, basically, if that was the genre. And there are moments on this record where Twisted Sister is basically doing pop metal also.
Mm-hmm. Thematically, he's just in a different place. I think that's maybe what separates it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of ran away with it there. Sorry. I just want to talk about Burn in Hell. It's just fucking crazy good.
I don't love that song as much as you do, and probably as much as Chaz does. To me, that falls into the camp of being, kind of like 10 years old at that point. Kind of a standard heavy metal track. I don't think the riff is that engaging. I do think that the vocal line on the chorus is pretty great.
As far as songwriting, from a progression standpoint of like because a lot of this is verse, chorus. I thought the instrumentation here was a little more dynamic as well. It does kind of change up as the track goes on.
It does. There is a bit of a shift. I think this is a flawed record, but is one of the better representations of a time in history when mainstream metal was just trying to become as poppy and punchy as you could possibly be. And I think Twisted Sister do it in a way that is endearing and enjoyable, rather than, making me want to throw up, which is the case for some other hair metal. And I'm not really, a hair metal fan, but Twisted Sister, and especially, as we mentioned, there's sort of the context of like watching Dee Snider explain like his love of making music and how he's not doing it to like hurt anybody. He's just making fun music. That kind of feeds into my enjoyment for this record as well.
So, my thoughts. It is a flawed record. I think that highlights for me are Stay Hungry, We're Not Gonna Take It, Burn in Hell, I Wanna Rock, The Beast, and SMF. For me, the lowlights are The Price and Don't Let Me Down. Honestly, you take that shit out, and it would not take away a damn thing. The formula that Brian's mentioning doesn't get tired for me because it's such a damn good formula, and they do it so well. It's only 37 minutes. It's a breeze and a half. I remember listening to this the second time, And after We're Not Gonna Take It, I was already at The Beast, and it felt like 5 minutes. I mean, it's quick. It is a quick listen. Horatoria is fine. I actually, all across the board, really like the lyrical content. Thought I liked it a lot more than I thought I was. They have this. Dee Snider just has this way of conveying emotions in a very simple way, but he writes it in a way where you can just put yourself in there and with your own imagination. And he mentions that during the hearing, where it's like, people have their own imagination when reading lyrics and they put themselves in that. That's why We're Not Gonna Take It is such a powerful song. Any side of any belief can use that for whatever reason to get their point across. I mean, we're not gonna take it. That could mean anything. But like, yeah, the lyrical content, I really like Horatoria in that department. I love the concept of this murderous child killer that gets let loose because of the flawed justice system. So all the parents are like, fuck you, we're going to kill you anyway. It was crazy.
His ass, dude.
I looked it up. This came out a good few months before the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, which
Dude,
I think was nuts.
I was fucking thinking about that because I was like, I think that's the same year. I know that's an 80s movie. Fucking hilarious.
84, both came out the same year. But I think Twisted Sister beat them on that plot because it's a very similar plot. You have this
great fucking movie, by the way.
Yeah.
I just want to say, in the first
Classic.
Nightmare on Elm Street, that is like a fucking actually awesome movie. Like, it's not the
Unwarranted.
best plot written.
Unwarranted movie opinions. Nightmare on Elm Street is a fucking kick-ass horror film. Holy shit, that ceiling
When
scene
are we doing
is
our movie episode?
never.
Like, when are we doing? We can only do one movie, but
I would do the SpongeBob
like one movie, all three of us watch
Yeah.
it.
Oh,
No,
SpongeBob movie.
I want to watch Nightmare on Elm Street, dude. That shit is fucking cool.
Not based.
I think the world needs another movie podcast.
Stay Hungry. Stay Hungry is an amazing opener. Burn in Hell is fucking awesome. That bridge is killer. I like The Beast. I really love the rhythmic drums and just like, it's the nature of the beast. It's awesome. It is so super cheesy.
I mean, it's fair to say that every single hook is like, well, that was awesome. Like, but sometimes the songs just aren't there.
I know,
but the hooks
I
are like,
know.
that was good.
Yeah, and then SMF, fantastic closer. The chanty kind of live rock vibe, it just plays to their strengths so much. But I think the performances are fantastic. Dee Snider is an amazing vocalist and frontman and just gives these songs so much character. It's killer. It's fucking killer. But it's not perfect. And I don't think you could really find an album in this genre that is perfect. I think that's just the beauty of glam metal. There's going to be flaws no matter what. But I'm going to go with a light 8 on this. It's technically a strong 7, but the nostalgia and how I learned about the band and the memories, it's a light 8. It's a light 8.
I'm going to go with a light 7.
Oh! Woo!
Really enjoyed it.
Let's go.
I go with like a decent to a strong 6 somewhere in there. It's cool. I mean, there's some really great qualities and great songs on it, but it is mega flawed. And when you listen all the way through, it's apparent. Talking about it, it's fucking sick. But like listening to it is kind of a different animal, But like I said, I think a lack of experience with glam. This is my first exposure to like a glam metal album of any sort, and
That's
everyone
the
knows
problem.
like glam metal. There are tons of songs that people know. Kids Are Back is by the same band, right?
Albums, though, it's a landmine, dude. It's a fucking landmine field. You could like find some gems. That's why like Twisted Sister is probably the best of like the big hits. But any other albums that you try to find, it's gonna get bad real quick. It's just one of those genres.
So the album I picked is the 1989 album Hat by the Blue Nile. The Blue Nile are a Scottish Sophisti-Pop group from the 80s. Very famously perfectionists in their approach to synth-led pop music. They only had 4 albums that span over a 20-year period.
Damn.
Their stuff was known for being exceptionally smooth, extremely well produced, not a hitch in the production anywhere, and just being, it's Sophisti-Pop. It's going to be evocative, and this album especially is, of Walking Through the City at Night or something of that nature. But this album, I think, is a bit more wistful. This album is Walking Through the City at Night, but after you've, had a terrible breakup and you're kind of drunk. That's what this album is. I personally had a long journey to get to where I am with this record. I first heard it in like 2018 and I liked it, but I wasn't like absolutely in love with it. Like I would come back to Downtown Lights for the most part. I would come back to Downtown Lights and I would come back to Saturday Night, the closer. But for the most part, for a little while, this wasn't an album I was supremely excited about. But there's just this album captures this feeling of wistfulness and nostalgia so well and so unlike any other album I've ever heard. This might capture, brooding about life better than almost any other album I've ever heard. Just the atmosphere, the way that the songs are sung, the lyricism, the melodies, everything. So I would start to come back to this a little more. Over the Hillside became a song that I really wanted to hear. And Headlights on the Parade, of course, became another. It's one of the catchier songs on the record. But Let's Go Out Tonight and From a Late Night Train and 7 a.m., which is still my least favorite song on the album. I think it's pretty solid. But Let's Go Out Tonight and From a Late Night Train still weren't quite there with me. But then you just hear From a Late Night Train at like 3 a.m, where nothing else is happening. It's entirely silent outside. Nothing else matches the feeling of going home and you're so tired you want to go to bed, but you have to keep like driving or you aren't quite there yet. Like that feeling of being stuck in an airport waiting for your flight even though you've been awake for 24 hours already. Like nothing quite matches that level of tiredness. Nothing sounds that sleepy and exhausted. Very, very few songs do. And that once I kind of got into that side of this record, the entire thing just became invaluable. And I've been listening to it frequently for the past 2 to 3 years, up to the point where it's become one of my favorite albums of all time. And Saturday Night is one of my favorite songs of all time. I listen to that song all the time. I knew that this album probably wasn't going to amaze anyone, but I just wondered if maybe that same emotional appeal got through to anybody else. And maybe it was a mistake because we only have a week or a little more than that to listen to these records. And this album was just it took so long to worm its way into my brain. But I don't know. I wanted to get something different as well, genre-wise. And we've never done a, synth pop ballads type of album yet. So.
Okay. I really liked it. And I even listened to it in the same setting you did, June. It just doesn't hit as emotionally as I think it wants to and I want it to. I listened to it like sprawled on the bed, nothing happening, just taking in the music. This was probably like second listen. And there were some moments that really I was like, damn. And it's all about the vocalist, his performance. It's powerful. It's so emotional. I like crying on the stairs is breathtaking.
That moment is so. It is.
I wish that moment didn't come in like the second or third song. I wish that was more of like a climax. Like okay, so let me get my critiques out of the way so then I can talk about what I really enjoyed about it. June, just hold your horses, okay? I already know what I'm about to say is going to get you all riled up.
You have no right to say this. You get so fucking bothered when there are a myriad of episodes where you can go back and I'm shitting on something you like, or June is shitting on something you like, and you're like, no, trash.
The lyrics are fine. I get what they're trying to do. It's very metaphorical, like Downtown Lights, reading into that. The problem is, it's just reading through them, it's like something is not connecting. And maybe I'll feel the same way that you did, where maybe, years down the way, something will click. But in the time that I've been listening to this, they just don't quite hit as hard as I want them to. I like the metaphors. I like the themes of loneliness, or on the train side, like watching the hills pass by or over the hillside, all those themes of loneliness and wanting. I don't know. It's just something about it just didn't work. I think the instrumentation is just a little repetitive. Every song is kind of like a mid-tempo, very synth-heavy song, which, it's Sophisti-Pop. That's what the genre is. But I don't know. I don't want to say that they blend, because they don't. What keeps them distinct is the melodies. Very distinct vocal melodies in every song. That helps me differentiate them. But I would have liked something a little bit more in the instrumentation. I did like the use of piano, though. That would come in every once in a while. Like twinkling keys.
Yep.
That was very nice. Very nice. Those are my critiques.
There's some guitars on this record.
There are, yeah. But it's that very standard 80s synth guitar. If you've heard it, you know it.
I know, but at the same time, it can be very beautiful. Like, for example, the last song, like the do, 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 that little oscillating series of notes on Saturday night is what drew me to that song initially.
What saves it all is the songwriting. It's very subtle, but it's pretty great throughout. Just something about you'll hear little things in the background twinkling over throughout the songs, and of course the beautiful vocals with great distinct melodies. For me, it's basically lyrics. I wish the lyrics were just a little hard hitting, maybe less cryptic, more just go for the gut, man. I know what you're talking about. Just go for it.
See, for me, I actually like the lyrical approach on this record. I think you probably are wanting it to be more specific and more direct. But I think this album's approach of painting these relatively vague pictures of isolation, of unrequited love, of loneliness, paired with the music, and that's the important part, works incredibly well to evoke the atmosphere they're going for.
Right.
Because this album can fit with any mood. When I was listening to this record for the first time, I wasn't like in a breakup phase of life. When I first started listening to this record, it was actually, I was in Scotland. I was lucky enough to go to Scotland a couple years ago. And I wanted to listen to some Scottish artists while I was in Scotland.
This is where it all started with your fucking
cool little project. When we had like a week. We had like a week and a half. And I listened to the Blue Nile while we were in a RV. We were like spent like a couple nights in an RV. Like we drove around multiple places in Scotland, mostly national parks, like out in the middle of nowhere in the hills and the mountains, rural areas. So I just remember sitting on that couch, looking out the window at the mountains, with kind of the window open, and could kind of smell everything that was going on outside, and I could see, some birds. And then I was listening to Saturday Night, and everybody else had probably gone to bed. And in Scott, at that time of year, for whatever reason, and I guess it's probably because of the latitude, the sun is out till like 10:30. The sun is out a lot later. So it was probably like 10:30, and the sun was setting. And listening to that album, like, it has such a powerful essence of life about it that it's hard to describe. It clears my mind and it allows me to think more clearly. I don't even listen to it as a sad or mournful release, and I don't even think this album is necessarily sad and mournful overall, where it definitely can be. I think this album is about movement. It's about trajectory in life. I listened to this album, and that was on that, trip to Scotland. I remember while hiking, I was like, I think I kind of want to live in Louisville. It's kind of one of those things where you got to remove yourself from the everyday constant stimulation that we're all experiencing in 2021 and be bored a little every now and then. And that again, that feeds into why I love this album, because for me, like I said, it's about life trajectory. It's about figuring out what you want to do. And that combination of being out in the middle of nowhere in Scotland and not having, a bunch of stimulation all the time really worked with the themes of this record. And that's what I get with it today, even. Like, it just makes me think about my own life and other people's lives and the future. And yes, it is in some ways like a breakup record and a sad record, but it's also a record that's very much looking forward in a similar way to like Jane Siberry's The Walking.
It's very bittersweet, which is all you. That is a very emotion you gravitate towards. All right, Brian, pummel June. Just let it out, man.
It's definitely like when you throw it on, it's Junecore, right? Like you're like, okay. Like we're at a point where you throw like, okay. Yeah, I didn't like this very much. I thought it was pretty boring overall, honestly. I get that it's meticulously arranged. I get that it's very purposeful. It takes its time. All the songs are like 6 minutes and change, just about. Like all of them are pretty long, right? They're all sonically they're trying to kind of make this landscape of this city at night. Like you definitely get that vibe, and from the album cover too, you kind of get that vibe, right? Very dark blue and black colors, like kind of. It's like a silhouette on a rainy night in like a noir film or like like the Watchmen comics or something like that. It's stylized very heavily is what I'm trying to say. And the synth being the main instrument here, and this being very synth heavy. A lot of the instruments here, correct me if I'm wrong, are made by a synthesizer, and it gives this record a very neon feel, if that makes sense.
There's like actual keyboards and bass and guitar on it still.
Okay. The thing that stuck out to me was the keyboard, like the pianos and some of the strings that were coming in. Those are the things that stood out the most to me as qualities that I liked. I love some of the embellishments on a couple of the tracks, like the strings backing the refrain on Headlights on the Paradise is a really nice moment sonically.
Parade.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I think I have dyslexia.
Fake fan.
Big fan. I like the strings that kind of back that part. They're very rich and they come through on the refrain a couple of times on that track. Like the pianos that accent the vocals on Let's Go Out Tonight. The little kind of I don't know if it's an arpeggio, but it kind of sounds like it's like bling, you've got mail. It's like a couple of notes, played in a row.
I totally get it.
It's kind of like that.
My favorite part is when it goes ba 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 ba. I've been listening to that a lot. Yeah. The from a late night train has a great little piano on it too. Lots of moments that stick out that I like. Oh, that was really pretty, but they're just moments. They're pretty fleeting. Damn. I don't like the vocalist at all. I disagree with everything about the vocalist for me too. I think he's quite drab, and he's so reserved. He's so reserved that like his performances are kidding? You got to be kidding!
They're just unmemorable.
There are like so many moments in his performance that completely debunk your entire argument. Like completely.
That part on 7 a.m. where he's like, "Stop, go." I legitimately hated that.
Wow.
I don't like the vocalist at all.
Dude, this reminds me. This reminds me
seriously
so much of
not a
my
standout
elbow
vocalist
rant.
to me.
This reminds me so much of. I love how unrelenting you're being, but at the same time, fuck you. I'm just gonna steal your joke. Fuck you, dude.
Like there's some good songwriting here. Like I definitely like the melodies that I don't like his voice. Like I'm sorry, I could not get into it at all.
Wow, that's
and I think some of the
crazy.
songwriting here is good. But then my problem with that is they are very subtle, and they're
Yes.
like, I'm not saying that there's not detail, but they're so bare and lackluster in where they decide to go with these tracks. And the arrangements are pretty, but they don't, like, from point A to point B, there is no interesting segue. A lot of the tracks here have this quieter start, and then they build it to this louder crescendo in the back half. That happens with Downtown Lights, and it happens with Saturday Night as well, which, by the way, Saturday Night has the best vocal performance on the whole record. It's the only one I would dare say I've enjoyed. Everything else was just so bland to me. The lyrics, totally bland for me. Didn't connect with anything here. I think it's so unfortunate that they took so much time to build this kind of atmosphere with the instrumentation, only to not capitalize on it at all with the lyrics, and to just go with these very bare, lackluster, and bland, like lovesick songs, honestly.
Damn.
I didn't get anything out of this. I know that the closest, like, I don't want to compare this to the Elbow record because they are radically different in their vibes and their topics. But, like, the way Guy had his vocals are kind of, similarly subdued on some tracks, right? Like, he's not always a huge bombastic performer. And I get that record's a little more my speed. But I did think about it a little bit when I was listening to this, because I was like, lyrically, there are some moments on that one that are maybe... No, that's not true. That album's straight up poetry. Forget this comparison. I just don't... Like, I thought of that record as just a much better example of an album that was, like, about love. And this one is very love-driven. I mean, Let's Go Out Tonight... From a Late Night Train is him like, I'll think about you from a late night train. Like, it's clearly a little bittersweet, kind of breakup driven. That could be wrong because it is a little vague, and that's another problem I have is the lyrics are... I don't want to dig any deeper into what he's saying. I just feel like they're very basic. It just, to me, all these elements do not come together a lot of the time into complementary songs. What happens is we get some pretty soundscapes that have so-so songwriting and bland vocal performances and nothing interesting to say lyrically. I think this is easily one of my least favorite June picks, and I've generally been nothing but positive on those. Yeah, this is one of the most boring albums I think I've done for the show. Like, June, clearly your connection to this is quite emotional, and once it didn't strike that chord with me and I didn't find any other admirable qualities about it, I had basically sunk your battleship. Like, this thing, I didn't like it. I feel that this thing was slightly more memorable, like, to talk about some other records I didn't like, not to, like, redunk on them, but just for comparison's sake, I guess. Because, the canon of the show has a huge influence on, like, the music I'm consuming, right? This was, like, slightly more memorable than, like, Something Somewhat to me. And
Damn! You know what?
Fuck
This is
yourself.
so fun to watch when it's not me getting dunked on.
Go
I'm sorry, June.
fuck yourself,
but
you pussy bitch.
I need to revel in this a little bit, but I'm going to rebuttal. Brian, you're a big dum-dum. To say that there's no emotion or emotional things to connect to at all is ridiculous. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
He goes from being, like you said, in a lamenting shout to being quiet and almost murmuring in From a Late Night Train, showing a great deal of range, both, vocally and emotionally throughout this record. I think he's a beautiful singer as well. I think about Over the Hillside. I think about Headlights on the Parade. I'm kind of stunned that Brian wasn't into the vocalist here because he tends to really enjoy vocals that are done well. Like, I mean, they're an entry point.
There are memorable lines and, like, parts, but it's just, like, very fleeting moments.
Well,
otherwise,
June,
it doesn't impact me.
Let me see if I can pick Brian's brain a little bit because, Brent and Elbow again, not hot on the vocalist at all. Brian, was it more just the tone and attitude of his vocals, like the actual sound of his vocals, or was it the actual lyrics and music with it? Like, what about the vocals did you not like?
If I try to separate the vocals from the lyrics a little bit here and just listen to the sound of his voice, maybe the lyrics are hurting it more than I'm giving it credit for, because when I think about his voice, I don't hate his voice. I don't think he's a bad singer. I don't think I said that. I just don't like his vocal performances here because, and like I said, this could be more lyrical than I'm maybe giving it credit for now you've asked it, because he's not really coming through saying anything I really care about or resonate with. So when his vocals are so subdued, and they're supposed to be for like an emotional reason, right? Because it's kind of melancholy. I just tune out because I can't even grip onto the sound of his voice because it's just very quiet. It's very low tone, and it just doesn't like pique my interest at all. You know, on the Elbow record, the difference there, I love the lyrics on the Elbow record. Like the Bones of You is still lyrically one of the best songs we've ever done for the show. It's such an incredible song.
This is just talking about what we've heard. If June didn't like the vocals on this album, I would say, well, how does this compare to Oliver Tree's vocals or Michael Jarreau's vocals from Swans?
I don't think when we talk about it on the show and I'm like, oh, that's a well-written part or that's a great little jump from that. You don't really think about that when you're listening to it. It just catches your mind. You know what I mean? Those thoughts aren't fully formed. It's a little nebulous at that point. You're just kind of hooking onto you're like, oh, like the part where he's like downtown light. Like I can remember that part. I like that part. Can't remember anything else about the song or many of the other songs on here. So that's kind of where it's coming from. Is it from an experience standpoint? Is I'm not there. It's just not grabbing me. Like to give it credit for the things it does, which is be somber, fit in well with the soundscapes, and kind of hop all over the place emotionally, is fine. I don't disagree with that. It just doesn't bring me joy. I don't enjoy it. So, he maybe is doing those things, but I tune out a lot of the time because I just find it to be so bland overall. So it's hard for me to appreciate those aspects when, like, sonically I'm barely able to get into it. I just find this thing to be meticulously arranged, but like all the time they spent making everything so deliberate, it just doesn't pan out. It's just too bare. I wish they had fleshed it out more. I wish the vocal performances, like for tracks that are all very long, they're not very dynamic. Like they do have they change as they go on, but it's so minimal, and maybe I just can't appreciate that, and it could be one of those things that with time, right? Like time, maybe I'll want to go back to it or something. But in terms of the time span I had to listen to it for the show and the amount of times I got to it, and there's a moment with the albums I like on this show that you all bring where I'm just I'm like, yeah, that was great, or I can it's instinctual to like it, right? And it's just never happened. That was never my genuine reaction.
June looks so sad. This is how I feel every time you motherfuckers dunk on one of my favorite shits. So, June, I don't feel bad for you at all.
I'm not mad.
Just disappointed.
I'm feeling a light to decent 5.
Let Chaz.
No, I want to say my
you have
number.
a decent 5. Who gives a fuck? Chaz, what do you think?
I'm going to give it a strong 7. I really enjoyed it. It just doesn't hit as emotionally as I think it wants me to, like it did for you, June. But even I can't deny it. The great songwriting, amazing vocal performances. Just wish there was some more variety in the instrumentation. More of the keys would have been really nice on the strings. And the lyrics. Yeah, that's my biggest issue is just the lyrics. I don't know. Something about them just don't connect hard. But I don't know what the fuck Brian's injecting into his veins because that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Got dumb juice in his brain. This album is so unbelievably masterful at creating an atmosphere, an incredibly poignant and well-crafted atmosphere that is almost unlike anything else I've ever heard. The songwriting is unbelievable. Like you mentioned, there are so many little moments where there are these flourishes in the instrumentation that I think are phenomenal. The vocals, the lyrics, while simple, the way that they are sung just elevates them even further. This is an album that I bumped to a 10 not long ago. And Wow. Wow. You really give me a clap. This album is a 10 out of 10. Oh, clap. But,
Every time, June, when you bring a 10, it's just like, we know, June. we know.
Me and Des have both been like, yeah, it's all right.
rather than this being an album that I listen to and obsess over for a year and it becomes one of my favorites, this is an album that slowly went higher and higher and higher and higher, and now it's here.
Go, Brian.
Go what?
I'm gonna kill you.
So my pick. Hey, don't interrupt me. My pick is sorry.
I
I meant to have it pulled up.
I chose Lingua Ignota. All bitches die. If you
Yeah,
look
this
to
is
my
like-
left, you'll see.
I chose Lingua Ignota, All Bitches Die. This episode, and I
It's her 2017 release. Is this edited? Is this like?
no,
I chose
actually, I was just the way I talk. It's
Should I say it cheery? Should I be like, this is Lingua, or like should? Okay.
Just be a fucking human being.
I picked the 2017 debut album from Kristen Hayter, known as Lingua Ignota in music. This isn't good. I picked the 2017 debut from Lingua Ignota, All Bitches Die. Lingua Ignota and or Kristen Hayter.
So there's two entities.
She is a classically trained piano player and
Opera singer.
Catholic church vocalist, whatever you call that. That's really it. She's been a fan of extreme music for a good chunk of her life, from what I can tell in interviews and stuff. Very influenced by the avant-garde and extreme genres of music. Extreme being like, grindcore, death industrial, just like the really
Power electronics. A lot of what's going on here musically is noise, power electronics, industrial,
harsh
a bit of
noises.
harsh noise every so now. And she mentions, like, if you look at what she's talking about in interviews, she mentions the Rita. She mentions
She's very into
pretty well. She's well versed in that. In
that
those
drum metal group. Thou or Thu. So I mean, I think she's a Sun fan, but I was thinking she talks about Thu a lot. I think she's worked with them. Don't quote me on that, but stuff like that. Very into that kind of side of music, and that informs sonically what she's doing. But she's also got this using her classical background right to her advantage too, in the singing and the playing. And combining these two elements into a genre that is, I mean, super niche. It may be the most niche we've ever talked about on the show. We've not covered a lot in this vein. I don't think we've covered anything in this vein, actually.
No.
Neoclassical dark
Anna
wave.
von Hausswolf.
It's Anna von Hausswolf, but really that's more of a organ-driven out. Like, that is not a representation of what this genre is. In fact, Dead Magic, her Anna von Hausswolf's debut LP. Chelsea Wolfe is sort of in this vein, too. Those are kind of the bigger artists. Chelsea Wolfe
the closest artist to this that I've ever heard is probably Diamanda Gallis.
That's another one that's kind of in that vein. Like, was she classically trained as well? I don't know.
I'm not sure, but it's when she gets to like a bluesier, more jazz-oriented tune, that's kind of where I see similarities.
There's not a lot of names in the genre. It's and there's not a lot of big names. I would wager Lingua Ignota is the biggest name in this genre. Like, to come out. I mean, and she's the most recent as well. And I would wager she is the most famous for this sound. Is pretty much the figurehead of this genre as it stands.
What genre are you talking about?
Neoclassical dark wave.
I would still wager Dead Can Dance are the biggest group in that genre and basically started the genre.
Mm-hmm.
And both of the vocalists from that group have worked in numerous projects since that band's inception.
That's
but
true.
Today, I do think that Lingua Ignota maybe has overtaken Anna von Hausswolf. They're in this race, but they're both so different, and they're both not worth, like, it's not worth saying, oh, Lingua Ignota is so much better than Anna von Hausswolf, because they both have different niches.
It's not really all that
the
comparable.
problem is they're similar in the fact that they're classically trained in their abilities. Lingua Ignota is a classically trained singer and pianist, while Anna von Hausswolf is a classically trained organist. So the music's going to be different, but in that neoclassical dark wave, the elements are still similar. It's hard.
Yeah, like
You're never going to compare
Yeah.
drone to death industrial because they're exact opposites of each other.
That's the thing. The core of their sound is like you can like compare like that, but they're totally different animals. Like when you listen to them individually, you may not even think to compare them really.
The only way you compare them is like who's the better classic, like who has more classical knowledge, you know, is the only way you could ever compare them. It's sit them in a room and just have them hash it out, I guess. But you know, I guess
sonically, this is so much harsher than I talk about our experience on the show. Than like, and the Anna von Housewife we did, admittedly, is more tame than Dead Magic. Not necessarily is adventurous in a different way. But this one, it's totally different. It's so much harsher. First of all, the amount of harsh noise, death industrial noises, like there is metal clanging and glass smashing on this album. There are the sound of what I think are these floodlights, these little, what are they called, clamp lamps being slung around, as that was something that she does a lot in her live performances, is she'll be decked out in these clamp lamps, which are these, I have one here, but it's not a visual podcast, but you can look it up. Chaz, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm talking about this. This is a clamp lamp.
Yeah.
And she'll be decked out in those and slinging them about, and like they break, they dent. She has shown pictures of her legs like after the show. She is purple and bruised. Like it's a very extreme performance that she puts on. And that, to me, after seeing some of those live performances, that's what that sounds like to me, especially on that first track where there's a lot of clattering, tinny sounds that are surrounding the just crushing bass note that's ringing out. That
doesn't even sound like a bass note. It's like the most over blasted, distorted, it's
like
timpani.
God's bass with
it's
like an overdrive pedal.
It's the most. It's like if you hooked up a timpani drum or like a big high school band bass drum to a distortion pedal. Boom! It's crazy,
it's massive. It's thunderous. And then she wastes no time just showing you how loud she can get with these screams, just woe to all. And that's the thing about the presentation of this album, is it's kind of like it's a little bit of a bait and switch. Like All Bitches Die, and then some of the track titles, which are like
a little edgy. Just
it's funny,
smidge.
I laugh because the subject matter is quite dark, but the presentation of the topics on a very surface level is a little bit like, what the fuck is this? Like, it's a little bit like, this is extremely edgy titles, but
she sells
once you
it.
realize what she's covering on the album, which is, I mean, you should just look it up yourself. Honestly, there's no reason for us to get into it and speculate.
We don't have to speculate. However,
right.
However it is personal, or however it is artistic, there's a very religious twist to it. It takes a lot of inspiration from several quotes from the Bible, from different versions. That's what I've noticed too. Very different versions of the Bible, different installments. Like the King James one is used a few times. There's another, like an international version is used. It's very interesting where she's drawing inspiration to tell this story.
Yeah, it's quite theatrical too in a lot of its presentation, taken to an extreme. And on the album, a lot of times she's putting herself in the position of this like conquering like goddess, I guess. No, like this a violent, like,
she literally
vengeful
samples a serial killer that talks about her experience fighting off against a man. So we'll just, so we don't have to talk deep into it because we kind of goof this on our ass discussion.
All right, let's just throw it out. Let's just say content warning.
Yeah.
If you know Lingua Ignota's music, you know that it involves discussions around sexual assault, and we might be mentioning that on this part of the podcast.
We won't go into depth. Domestic abuse. I feel like that's like the core theme discussed here, but the way she presents it is so much more than that. It truly is elevated by use of biblical passages and themes. It creates just this huge, it feels like a Greek play.
It kind of waxes and wanes between intensity, calm, intensity. So the calmer here is a piano-led, very reverb-heavy vocal performances. that is very lyrically driven. Is kind of a way for Lingua to flex her classical training a little bit and show you, just how capable she is as a singer, but also the emotion that pours into it as well. The serial killer mentioned before. And this episode kind of requires you to do a lot of research on your own, I think, if you're listening, because you kind of need to read about Eileen yourself and draw your own conclusions about maybe why she was sampled here.
And I have a lot. That's what I want to touch down on the most.
Admittedly, not a ton of variation in the sounds here. It's all very much an atmosphere.
Not all music needs to be winding passages. And
right.
I mean, look at, music can be repetitive and still be great.
Mm-hmm.
The trick the trick is placement. The way that we take turns with the thunderous, cacophonous vocal performances and music, which admittedly really only happens in the first track. The rest, besides a few noise here or there, is mostly piano and strings, besides the first track. But the vocal performance is
fucking massive.
Yeah, it's massive,
5 minutes,
but it's still mostly piano in the instrumentation. But if you were to switch back and forth with the vocal performances, however, it's very distinct and it shows a lot of variety and shows just smart composition. I never feel once like, oh, this sounds just like the last song we heard, or man, is this ever going to change up?
I want to talk about the last track, which is one of my favorite Lingua Ignota songs, if not the favorite. Just this 5-minute piano ballad with just imagery that is so striking to me and a vocal melody to me that is so hypnotic. It is a perfect ending and just kind of sentiment to leave the album off on, as it's a very vengefully tinged.
I get serious, I spit on your grave vibe. It's not happy, but I feel like justice was served. I end the album with a good for her kind of vibe.
There's finality. There's definitely finality there, sonically and lyrically. This was one I listened to actually as it came out. I stumbled into it somehow. I can't remember exactly. I think I was just looking. I was trying to dabble in extreme music, and I tried it, and I was like, okay, that was cool. And then Caligula comes out, and I loved Caligula, and I was like, this is crazy. And then I saw All Bitches Die Again. I was like, that's her. And I got to tell you, her second LP only drove this one up to me in value in terms of what I get out of it, because it's just so much clearer after Caligula came out. Because I feel like on the next album, which we're gonna do at some point, we have to now.
We have to, yeah. It's clear they're connected.
She just perfects these ideas on that next record, and so going back to this one, you get an idea of where everything was coming from, right? Sonically, theatrically, whatever.
It goes further than that. It's clear they're connected. Yeah. They're like a double package. Album covers are very similar with a very different paint, colorscape and imagery, but it's the themes, religious themes, and about her experiences and everything. You cannot help but put them together as just one.
They are kind of sister albums, yeah. That's it. I love the record. I think it's awesome. It stands to me as one of my favorite records ever. Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's amazing. I love the music on it, and there's a part of me that contemporarily connects with it too, because it's just so fucking exciting to be alive when someone is making music that just is resonating with you on this level. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. I'll leave it to you two.
So again, this is not going to be a very comfy conversation, but I feel like I need to make certain points that affect how I think about this record. So again, content warning for sexual assault. I concur with everything that has been said about the composition of these tracks, the way that they're arranged on the record, the sound of these songs, everything musically. I am in total agreement with, and I'm in agreement that the lyrics are powerful as well. The thing I want to hone in on here that got me thinking more than anything else is the choice to sample Eileen Wuornos for certain vocal passages, for spoken word passages. Reading about her life is one of the most disturbing things I've ever had to read, because it partially is because she's still referred to very commonly as a serial killer in the same vein as people like, I don't know. I won't even
John
say
Wayne
their names
Gacy,
because
Jeffrey
it's fair.
Dahmer, the typicals.
People who killed for gratification and for the thrill. People who are, sociopathic and terrifying. Whereas Eileen Wuornos, when you read about her history, was such a broken person that any kind of sexual anything coming from a man would just make her snap. And I get really like I don't want to, like, I don't know if she's guilty or not for everything that she did. Right? But up until the end, she still mentioned that everyone that she killed was either assaulting her or about to assault her or had assaulted her before. It's kind of her way of getting a revenge. And bullet justice something that we need to look at politically? No. But when you look at her story as someone who's been so defeated by sexual assault, basically snapping, you think to yourself, well, of course she did. How could anyone not? This whole thing could have been avoided with this whole situation could have been avoided. So I think it's so horrible when you see her name like listed on like articles that are like female serial killers, women who are luring men in and then killing them and blah 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 blah. When you read about like her story and her childhood and everything, it's like, God, like there's a little more nuance to it in the situation, I think. And the fact that Kristen Hayter decided to put her on this record feels like, I think she understands that. It's a process of healing for her. And she's saying, this is my process of healing, making this music. And I think she's in some way saying, like, I gotta do this. Like, I have to put this music out here. But there are people who, and I don't even know if it's their, like, they got, like, it's just so hard to conceive of, you know what I mean? It's so difficult. It's so difficult to even consider. And then the question of morality and responsibility or guilt on Wuornos's side of things is such a difficult topic to parse. And the fact that Kristen Hayter decided to highlight it a little on this record, I think is very, very powerful. How she decided to sort of take some of that confusion and turmoil and kind of make her music about that. Because there's not a lot of music that I can think of that so directly touches on that topic. How horrible things can make people do horrible things. And that's assuming she did them not out of self-defense. And she said all the way up to the end that she did do them out of self-defense. It's such a fuck situation. But that's where this puts you. It breaks you down, and you consider certain things, and you just kind of end up staring at a wall for a little while, contemplating and trying to come up with the right answer in your head when it's so hard to find one.
There is no right answer. And that's the beauty of art in general. Someone gives their interpretation and we interpret it ourselves, and it's a never-ending cycle. I'm going to say my piece and I'm going to give my score. First listen, I was low-key kind of into this. And the more and more I listened to this, just... Okay, let's get my critiques out of the way. First track, the goes on a little too long. It loses its luster after a while, especially on repeated listens, to the point where it's like, this isn't really like, as horroring as I think. The more horroring moments are just when she's screaming behind some piano chords. Those are the more like, oh shit moments. The fucking noises and stuff. It's cool. I think that first track goes on a little too long. The best moments are just her, piano, and strings. Like, we don't need the crazy noises. We don't need the we don't need any of that shit for her to just completely to completely get across the themes, the purpose, the poignancy of what she's saying, what she's talking about, and why she's talking about it. I mean, that last track is just so breathtaking. When she hits those high notes and just holds it over, it's just
Chaz did not hit them.
It's fucking stunning.
You shouldn't have went for it, dude. I'm sorry.
I want the viewers to know what I'm talking about.
I assume they've heard it if they're here.
The lyrical content really, really just pushed this over the edge to me, because I actually really enjoyed this music. I actually really, really enjoyed it a lot. Like a lot. So it's, when I give my rating, understand that this rating comes from two directions. One direction it'll come is if I just love it, love it to death. But another rating will come from where I just throw my hands up and say, yeah, this isn't just music anymore. This is a piece of art. Just like Caretaker, just like Anna von Hauswolf. I mean, I can't give this anything lower than a light 9. It is fucking astounding. And this is just the debut. I'm hyped for Caligula. I've been wanting to really dive into that for the longest time because you see it everywhere. But, I mean, Jesus Christ. This is one of the most bone-chilling, gripping, and powerful, poignant, and beautiful pieces of music we've ever talked about. I mean, just her vocal performances are powerful. And the lyrics associated with them just come from such a real place. But the religious ties make it so much more. Just makes it so much more grand. Like we talked about earlier, like anybody could put themselves in this situation, especially if they understand what she's going through.
I am personally going to go with a strong 8. While the themes of this record captivate me and the music of this album is fantastic, I'm not quite like at a level of obsession with the music, I don't know. This is an album that could easily go up to a 9 in the future. And the number matters the least. We've talked about how we feel about it and we've gone a little further into detail.
The number is cringe.
Like I said, this is art. It's not even music anymore. This is a piece of art. Put it in a museum.
It's art.
Crunkcore is not art, my friend.
Crunkcore is art.
It's art.
Yeah, it's art.
It is art. It's bad art, but it's art.
Is it bad art, though?
Hold on.
Hold on.
I didn't say it was bad art.
I didn't say that. I just didn't say it wasn't art. Don't get it twisted.
So yeah, I love this thing. I thought you all would love it, or you'd be too pussy to say you didn't. So pleased with that result. Yeah, pretty much for all the reasons stated. Great shit. Love it. Love the record. Shout out Cheez-Its. 9. Amazing record. Cheez-Its.
Speaking of cringe, next time, what are we doing?
No shit.
Next time it's nostalgic. It's nostalgic.
We've done nostalgic ones before. What were the picks? What did we do?
Seether,
last time we did
AC/DC, and Fish.
And Fish, yeah.
Seether is staying to my mind. Don't
and
even remember.
We were all jammed into the same little recording booth because we got locked out of production. And like you were sweating and like red in the face while you were talking about Seether.
Perfect.
Oh man.
Oh boy. Those were the days.
Yeah. I'll go first.
Right.
I'll go first. I'll kick us off with a strong one. I've been back and forth in my mind. but I've name dropped the band I'm going to pick so many damn times in so many different instances. It's about damn time we talked about them. We're going to go with Insane Clown Posse. Your boy used to be a juggalo back in the day. Back in the
Used to
day.
be.
We're going to go with arguably their best album. It's got what I consider their best song on it. That's why I'm picking it. It's over an hour long because of course it is. I wouldn't have it any other way. We're going to go with The Great Malenko by Insane Clown Posse that came out in 1997.
This took a lot of thinking. And I actually just decided just now.
I've been ready.
Dude, I'm fucking cringe. This is awful. Okay.
Brian is all the only reason we do nostalgic albums.
I'm defenseless on these episodes. Okay. So back in the day, your boy was a big Eminem fan and was a really big fan of like the Slaughterhouse label. I say back in the day, this is 10 years ago, and he's 20 years in the game at this point. And this was one of the very few albums I listened to. Normally I was just a song person, but this is one of the albums. It's actually a duo, a rap duo. It's Royce da 5'9" and Eminem, known as Bad Meets Evil. I can look at you. Neither of you have a fucking clue about this.
I think I actually know what you're talking about, but
Bad Meets Evil Hell, the sequel, is the album we're doing. Because and now to be fair, this thing kicked ass back in the day, so I'm really hoping it holds up. I'm hoping there's not like some transphobic shit on here incidentally, or like there's probably a little bit of homophobia that just pervade. It's gonna be there. We can't get around it. Yeah, this is one of the few like records I could think of. It strangely doesn't have Lighters on here, which is one of their bigger songs. I think we have to do the deluxe version.
Brian.
Yeah,
so we're doing the deluxe.
The
fucking standard version. I'm gonna let's do an hour-long album.
No, we're doing the deluxe version because
No,
we are. I'm picking it. It's actually my pick. Is Hell the Sequel Deluxe Edition? It's 46 minutes.
Why?
Because it has one of the songs that I was most nostalgic for on it. That's probably awful.
Brian.
With Lighters, with Bruno Mars.
I mean,
so we have to do that one.
I mean this with all certainty.
And I'm on Everything is one of the better songs from it too. Hell, most of the B-sides are better than what was there.
I mean this.
We're doing the deluxe version.
All the love in the world, but you are a pussy. You could have gone so much harder for this theme than you did just now.
But this album, like, okay, so like 3 Days Grace 1X, right? Like, that was what I was going to go with originally. But honestly, looking at the songs on it, I was like, you know what? I don't really remember a ton of these all that well, which is to say I know some of them very well. But this one I jammed all the fucking time. I remember car rides where I was listening to this song, and I used to connect to this album from like a great deal because I thought it was really beautiful at some points. I know, it's disastrous already. So we have to do the deluxe version because the songs I remember the most are actually on there. It's only 46 minutes. It's 10 minutes longer. I think there's literally.
I will have the longest album. I'm sorry, guys. That's just how it goes.
Yeah. So Bad Meets Evil, Hell the Sequel, deluxe version.
Oh, Jesus.
Maybe.
A lot of rap. A lot of rap.
Well, I was into real rap back in the day, you know. Eminem was a real
fucking
rap
magnets. How do they work?
Dude, fuck yeah. All right, June, what do you got? You got a good pick? You got to come through with something good here. You can pick a Beatles album. You can just like...
I'm not nostalgic for Beatles.
Okay, well, just pick something good.
I'm picking an album that I listened to very frequently my freshman year of high school. It's by my dad's favorite band. He showed this band to me among a few other groups that I grew to just obsess over and listen to constantly throughout high school. Remember, it was the summer before high school, and he showed all these artists to me. His favorite band, the 90s alternative rock band Blind Melon.
Oh, okay.
And their second album, Soup.
Okay.
Blind Melon are most well known. Soup. They're most well known for their single "No Rain," which is the most Blind Melon-like Blind Melon song.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about them before.
Which is kind of how that works.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Blind Melon?
Yep. Soup by Blind Melon.
They're a cool group.
Suit. All right, this has been Unwarranted Music Opinions. I was joined by June Lindberg.
Mm-hmm.
And Chad's Junkie, Chud Monkey. Chud Monkey. That funky monkey.
That's Juggalo. Chud Monkey to you.
Yeah, maybe don't be too proud of that. And I'm Brian.
Hey, the Juggalos are cool.
And this was
They're cool. They're cool.
We'll see. We'll see you around. We'll deal with that next time. See you around. Thanks for listening.